I bring my own set, so I didn't realize nobody else had.
No worries.
Good morning.
Hey, John, it's Jen. I'm here.
Good morning, Jen. I'd like to call the Planning and Stakeholders Relations Committee to order. The first order of business is the roll call. And so Stephanie Turman.
Here.
Allie Doyle. I think Allie's out of town. Ann O'Gorick.
Here.
Okay. Good morning, folks. Any board members that would like to introduce themselves?
Jeff Letwin.
Jen Liptak.
Hey, John, Jerry DeLone.
Hi, Jerry.
Lori Mizgorski.
Lori.
Michelle Smianik.
Michelle. Any other board members? Seeing none. First item on the agenda is the approval of the November 10th meeting minutes. Any corrections to those meeting minutes? Seeing no corrections, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Now, next on the agenda is the FY 2022 annual service report presentation. David and Ellie, are you on the call?
Yes, good morning, everyone.
Morning. So you're going to start, Ellie?
Yes, I am.
Okay. You're up.
All right, thanks. Good morning, everyone. My name's Ellie Newman. I'm Section Manager of Service Development here at PRT, and I'll be presenting our annual service report for the fiscal year 22. So the annual service report, if you're not familiar, this is where we take a whole annual look at our system and kind of evaluate ourselves against our own standards, make sure that we're performing our service efficiently, effectively, and equitably. So we evaluate our system on various performance metrics. These could be things like crowding, ridership, on-time performance. We also do a equity and Title VI analysis. And this is again based on the fiscal year 22. So that's June of 2021 through, July of 2021 through June of 2022. So the big story for FY22 is our ridership return. So all of our modes did have, almost double-digit increases or more compared to FY21. We totaled just over 32 million riders. That compares to, we used to be over 60 million back in the pre-pandemic days, but we're getting a little bit closer to that. The bus ridership was up 42% and light rail was up 51%. Incline was up 67% and access was up 27%. And with that ridership return, that increases our passengers per hour and our ridership efficiency. So our passengers per service hour increased over 50% from fiscal year 21, which means that our cost per rider went down. So we can see from these charts, we had a huge spike in cost per rider in FY21, and that wasn't so much because our costs increased, it was more because our ridership had dropped so drastically. But we're being able to kind of drive those numbers back down to a baseline now. With on-time performance, we had very small dips in on-time performance for FY22. Bus went down from 71.8 to 71.4%. So, basically a rounding error at that point. We did see a bigger decrease for our rail. So we went from 88.7 down to 83.2 last year. And that is attributable to our red line detour, which was in place for a good portion of the spring of FY22. There was a bridge that had an issue, and we had to have a pretty significant detour on that route. So another good story from our progress in the last 5 years is increasing the coverage of our system. So we've been able to increase the percent of jobs and population that is covered by our system in the last 5 years. So now we're at the point where throughout all 7-day service, we now cover 59% of jobs and 48% of the population of Allegheny County. Access and coverage of our system. Next, I'll talk about our service standards evaluation. So we're still operating under what feels now to be kind of outdated transit service standards. So they were based on pre-pandemic ridership and capacity and things like that. So we did have many routes that did not meet certain of those goals. In terms of frequency, we had 10 routes that were out of compliance for our frequency. We've been kind of adjusting some of our headways and frequency down as we've dealt with operator shortages and low ridership on certain types of routes. So we may look at lowering our standards to not force us to put service back if it doesn't make sense with the efficiency of the route. Or we may look at adding some trips where that does seem to make sense. With on-time performance, we had 79 routes out of compliance. This has been kind of an ongoing issue as we've just had there's just so many issues out there with trying to keep these routes on time and things that are outside of our control. So one thing that we're looking at is adjusting our standards to be more realistic for the routes that operate in mixed traffic. So when we don't control the roadway, we don't control the detours, we don't control the traffic signals, it can be very difficult to keep routes on time. So just kind of adjusting our standards to recognize that and hold ourselves to a goal that we can meet more easily. With passengers per hour, this was really the tough one for us because, again, our ridership is so much lower than it used to be. So we had 97 routes out of compliance. That's almost all of them for our passengers per hour standards. They are starting to look a little bit better this fall, but we also believe that we should reduce our standards a bit to be more realistic. And I think you would see basically every transit agency is doing similar things. Then with our Title VI analysis, so in this section, we look at our routes and we determine whether they are routes that serve minority or low-income communities. And we just compare them to routes that don't serve these communities and make sure that the service provided is at least on par. So this is something that we've made big strides on from last fiscal year. Previously, we had pretty significant findings for overcrowding and out of service as well. And this year we were able to really drive down the disparity in crowding between low-income routes and non-low-income routes, as well as minority routes and non-minority routes. So that was another positive that we were able to do by kind of adjusting our trips, adjusting our vehicle sizes, and making sure that we can deliver enough service to meet demand. So as far as our fiscal year 23 plans, so on-time performance, we've made adjustments to almost, I would say probably the bottom, like maybe 20 or 30 routes that scored poorly in the annual service report. We've been programming in changes that should be taking effect this spring and summer. So it might not kick in for the next report, but we should start to be seeing a big improvement in that, hopefully. We're also going to be looking at developing new transit service standards. So we want to come up with some standards that are a challenge, but a challenge that we can still achieve. So that will set a good kind of floor or a standard of minimum performance that our routes should achieve. Then finally, we are going to be embarking on a transit network study. So we received a pretty significant grant that we can use to take a holistic look at our system. We can see what routes and areas perform well, which ones might be a bit more tailored towards a pre-pandemic reality, and try to figure out how to adjust our whole system to be more efficient, equitable, and effective. So we're in the scoping phase for this, and we should be kicking it off publicly this summer. That concludes my report. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Ellie. Any committee members have questions? Additional board members, you have any questions of Ellie?
John, I actually do. This is Jen. I thank you for the time. Ellie, what did you say about the on-time performance for the routes? I just wanted to get that number again.
Yeah.
79% are still not on time?
Yes. So we have goals based on the type of route, and we found that one of the big reasons that we've not been able to hit these goals is because our commuter route standard is 80%, and most of our commuter routes are more in the 70-ish range. So it is about 79 routes did not meet that standard, but it's more because the standards just weren't particularly realistic when they were developed. And I think when we come up with our new standards, we'll have a lot better chance of meeting them.
Madam Vice Chair, this is Catherine weighing in, and Ellie, thank you. This is excellent data, but Ellie hits a really good point. When we look at our own car trips or we look at traffic, we normally trend about 85% on-time performance, and that's for folks who are just going from one point to another. And on-time performance being a minute early to 5 minutes late. Standards at 80% are very aggressive. They were even aggressive pre-pandemic. So I'm with the routes that are hitting in the 78 to 74, 75%. This is pre-pandemic, not bad performance. It does behoove us though to set the standard where we can target it and also continue the work our scheduling group is doing to look at our routes in a very systematic fashion to make sure as much as we can control things, we are producing a schedule that our operators can meet and that our passengers can rely on. And thank you for letting me interrupt.
No, I think that's great. Thank you, Catherine, for explaining that. I understand over the time periods, different standards come into play. I just, one of the things, I think Catherine would be very good at this, is just stressing, you know, there's a lot of ideas, thoughts about doing new things, innovative things, cool things, whatever. It's good that the Port Authority, I know your Catherine is specifically focused on this, just getting back to basics, you know, rebuilding our infrastructure and getting back to basics, which is our quality of service. Once that has been reestablished and the confidence is back, which I think is beginning, then the Port Authority has the opportunity to do some more innovative planning things. But until that time, it's good that we're focusing on trying to work on those basic services, which is reliable, safe, effective, and efficient service. So thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Jen. Are there any stakeholders have questions? Okay, seeing no additional questions, thank you, Ellie. Excellent report.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Next item is Philip St. Pierre, who's going to be talking about the February 2023 service changes. Philip.
Good morning. Thank you. Good morning, committee members. I am Philip St. Pierre. I'm the Director of Transit Scheduling here at PRT. And today I'm going to discuss the February 19, 2023 service changes. Typically, we would be coming in February to discuss the March changes, but with the upcoming or with the updated collective bargaining agreement with our local ATU 85, we have decreased the number of service changes in that contract from 4 to 3. In that contract, the months that we will be making service changes will be changed to February, June, and October. And then in the past, it was March, June, September, and November. So this is going to really help us get a little bit more time for analysis in between those service changes. So with the update of that collective bargaining agreement, our first next service change will now be in February, and that's going to be on February 19th. The category for these changes that I'm going to brief today, we're going to talk about some running time adjustments, as Ellie presented, that we have some routes that are struggling with on-time performance, and we're really taking an aggressive approach to update some running times into our routes to hopefully perform better. So we're going to continuously evaluate those routes. In all routes eventually, but we've got a good number of routes that we're targeting for February, and we're going to be looking for on-time performance improvements for those routes. We have a couple frequency changes for those routes, a few routing changes, and some trip adjustments for the February service change. So that's mainly the categories that the service changes are broken down into. So we'll start off. Let's see if I can. Yeah, can you advance for me? I don't think this clicker's working. All right, thank you. All right, so for running time adjustments that we aim to improve on-time performance and reliability for the following routes. The following routes will have all days of the service will have running time adjustments in the routes. The routes 1, 6, 14, 28X, 31, the 61A, B, and C, the 69, 77, 86, 87, 88, and 93. The following routes will have just weekday time adjustments because they operate on weekday only. That's going to be the P10, the P69, P76, P78, and the Y1. So in total, 19 routes there that we're working for on-time performance. Next slide, please. Due to some additional running time in some of the routes that we evaluated on the previous slide, we were able to work out some modifications to the frequency due to the running time adjustments. That's going to be the Route 1, which will be going on the weekdays from every 30 minutes during most of the day to approximately between 24 to 32 minutes of frequency for most of the day, and will remain hourly in the late evening for the Route 1 on weekday. Route 14, kind of the same situation where we're going from frequency of every 46 minutes to a standard 40 minutes frequency for most of the day, and we'll go to hourly service in the late evening, and that will remain as it currently is operating. Next slide, thank you. The following routes will have modifications due to the routing for a variety of reasons. I'm going to group them into the 59, the Y46, and the Y1. We're going to have some routing modifications due to the discontinuation of the Century 3 mall park and ride lease agreement. The property owner for that property has determined that they wanted to discontinue the park and ride lease agreement. That's actually going to be discontinued on February 6th. We have issued a public notice on those changes that park and ride is going to be discontinued. We're going to make minor route modifications to those routes. The routes Y46 and Y1 will just stay on Clairton Boulevard so that it doesn't deviate into the mall. The Route 59, it will still turn into the south entrance of that mall, but that will be the last stop for that route instead of the park and ride being the last stop. The next group of routing changes, can you go back one, please? The 61A and the 61B the routing for that route will return over the Fern Hollow Bridge now that it has reopened. Currently, we have that route on detour to use the bridge, but we are going to formalize that into the schedule for the 61A and the B. The P69, we are reversing the loop in a counterclockwise loop for outbound trips in the afternoon for those outbound trips, or all day for those outbound trips in Trafford. That will mirror what the Route 69 is currently operating. Next slide, please. And the following routes will have time adjustments for a variety of reasons, and I'll go through that. The Route 54 on weekdays, we changed one inbound trip that currently ends at Bon Air. That will now end at South Hills Junction. We had kind of a gap in scheduling for some trips out of South Hills Junction. By changing that from Bon Air to South Hills Junction, improves the frequency from South Hills Junction for the 54 on the weekdays. We have a variety of trips or routes that are going to be have some times that are shifted. That's going to be the 59, 61C and D, 64. The 86, 87, and 88. We also have some routes where we are reducing the number of published time points. These bus stops will remain, but on a public timetable perspective, we are reducing the public published time points. We're trying to aim for approximately every 10 minutes in between time points for routes. So those routes will be the 58, 69, 77, 81, 83, 86, 87 and 88, and the P78. So we're reducing some of those published time points. The Route 91, one inbound trip has been removed from the schedule and it didn't pair up with an connecting outbound trip. The 93, we added one additional inbound and outbound trip in the afternoon. And that concludes my presentation for today, and I can answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Thank you, Philip. The park and ride at the mall, did we look at alternative sites for another park and ride?
Yes, our transit amenity teams has looked for alternatives, and we have not yet been able to identify an alternative location at this time. It's something that we'll continue to look at. We did look at the ridership in that area for the usage of the park and ride, and it looks to be approximately about 10 passengers using the Century 3. So that's something we'll continue to look for alternatives in that area.
Thank you. Committee members, any questions?
I guess I'm just curious what your methodology is for writing schedules for like, and I'm just using it as an example, the routes that go through Uptown right now, because I don't even know how you could write a schedule and then expect anything to be on time. I mean, I just drive through that corridor and I'm like, I feel sorry for anyone, you know, using those buses, because you just never know what you're going to run into. So I don't know how you handle situations like that are seemingly ongoing, and do you write a schedule according to the construction, or do you just hope for the best?
In most times, we don't adjust the schedules for the construction. Depending on the length of the construction, the construction for that particular project has been ongoing, and we have been collecting data from our what's called the AVL, which is Automatic Vehicle Locator, and we are able to import that data into our scheduling software that we are able to help us build schedules based on that collected data. We recently had some additional training on that module within our scheduling software. And most times, if we do have a long-term detour, we'll try to sample out that data to try to build a more realistic schedule that will not be impacted by a detour. When there are long-term detours that are planned and we do have data, we will try to add as much time as we can into the schedules to try to be more realistic with our schedules. But for the Uptown schedules, I don't believe we have adjusted those schedules to accommodate for that construction at this time.
Yeah, I just feel like they're probably getting dinged in your report, but I'm like, that is truly beyond anyone's control.
Correct.
Thank you, Ann. Any other board members have questions of Philip? Any stakeholders have any questions of Philip? Okay, thank you very much, Philip, for the presentation. Next on the agenda is a brief update from David Huffaker on the public comment period for the BRT service changes. David?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm David Huffaker, Chief Development Officer here at PRT. And I just wanted to provide a brief update on where we are in the BRT public comment process. This is around the service changes that have been proposed for some time, a future service change in 2023. As you'll recall, this was a process that was authorized by the board back in November. We opened up for public comments starting on December 1st, and the public comment period will last until February 1st at 5 p.m. We, in the month of January, hosted an information session that was actually last week, where we had an interactive session to allow people to review the changes, hear a presentation from PRT staff, and provide comments and or questions to learn a little bit more about what's being proposed. And then just yesterday, we had a series of 3 public hearings at various times throughout the day, where we provided an opportunity for interested stakeholders to come in, provide public testimony so that could get in the official record. Our team will be providing an official report out in February to summarize the comments that we've heard, talk about next steps, and how we will be considering changing the proposals that were put out on the street last year, late last year. So I would say to date, we've had well over 100 comments in various forms, and I'll go through the way people can comment through now through February 1st. And then in the hearings yesterday, we had approximately 8 commenters provide official testimony. So we're excited to hear from stakeholders, get the engagement, and I do want to thank the significant investment of time by the board yesterday, as well as PRT staff, to help make those hearings a success. So for those who are still interested in providing public comment, there are 3 ways to provide that comment. You can go online to the PRT website and at www.rideprt.org/BRT. There's a form where you can submit your comments. You can also call to record it. There's a line that will record your comments, and that phone number is 412-566-5335. Or if you would like to either mail or hand deliver your comments, you can provide those to the PRT offices here downtown at Pittsburgh Regional Transit, attention BRT service changes, 345 6th Avenue, 3rd floor, and that's Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Zip code is 15222. So those comment, as I mentioned, the comment period is open until 5 p.m. on February 1st. So we encourage anyone to wants to provide either a supportive comment or a comment making a request to please submit that by that time. And I'd be happy to take any questions. John, I think you might be muted.
Yeah.
I am muted. Thanks, David. Any questions from committee members? Any questions from board members?
Yes, David, it's Michelle. I have a question. I'm not sure. It's from some of the comments that I've heard over a period of time about riders who, when we are changing the schedule, adapting, doing anything, who seem to bring up some challenges to riding the bus. And normally these are personal challenges, whether they're physical, aging, frailties, illness, whatever it is. And so the question in my mind is, when are people unable to physically ride a bus without challenges and safely? And it just seems that or advertising or marketing enough the opportunities to use access. And maybe access is too expensive for a portion. I'm not sure, because I've visited some of those challenges with family. But some of the things that I've heard from people is the kneeling buses come down, they kneel, but it's still a challenge for me to get on. Or I can't get my shopping on the bus, those kinds of things. And I think those are some things, I'm not sure what we can do about it. It's a huge topic, and I'm just bringing it up for our consideration as we move forward and not looking for a solution today.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. I think Catherine wants to jump in.
Good morning, Madam Board Member. Good morning. So these are excellent points and excellent questions. So there's this, clearly from the ADA of 1991, we have very clearly defined standards of if a patron cannot do X, Y, Z, they can qualify for paratransit. So an example is under the ADA in the certification process. If someone can't travel a quarter mile within a certain time frame, if they can't stand unassisted for 10 minutes, for instance, like at a bus stop, they can qualify for paratransit. This is not the same thing as saying if someone can't walk a quarter mile, they cannot use fixed route. And what I'm hearing is we're talking about that gray space, that maybe somebody can't go 1,200 feet easily, because, you know, the ADA was written for places that look like this, not for places like Pittsburgh. So 1,200 feet is very different here. In our November board meeting, we had a patron speak to the board who said, look, I walk about 400 feet up to my main street, and then I have to walk another 200 feet to a stop. And if you pull it, it's 400 feet. That's 800 feet. That's well within what the ADA would say was a person who should be moving over to access, but in Pittsburgh, it might be a different type of consideration. And then kneeler is another good point too. If we are kneeling within the standard of the ADA, it may be that if you can't go up a step of 10 to 12 inches, you qualify for access. What if it's 9 inches? Does that mean somebody has to use a van instead of being able to access fixed route? So with the committee's indulgence, we will come back to you with a presentation on, what are the standards we meet for ADA to say if someone cannot do these things, how we move over. Other examples are if somebody cannot navigate a route without the exact same consistent signposts, if somebody would not be able to understand the bus breaks down and they have to transfer to another bus that will take them somewhere, if that is beyond their ability to process, they can qualify for access. But it sounds like we could do an update to you about how we sort of deal with that gray area of folks who maybe could qualify for access but still want to use fixed route. How do we handle this? I'm also really, really impressed and very proud of the work our access group does as far as certifications. Right across the street, they have this amazing facility that has an actual bus in it. So when somebody comes in for training or for an evaluation, they go through the real world standards. We can see how they're performing and how we can best help them. So an update on that too. So let us come back to the committee with more information. But you hit a very salient point. Pittsburgh is very transit oriented and it's very, I am looking for a good word and I can't make one up. Folks like to walk around here and the city is built around that. And how can we support that as our population ages, as our infrastructure ages, and make sure more people have access to the network? So we'll come back to you if that's okay.
Thank you for that. And that's wonderful. And part of this is a factor that we can't control. And that's the realization of maybe some riders, I just can't do this anymore because of lifestyle changes, illnesses, whatever it is, which, I'm just bringing it up because I've heard it from some of our riders and it's a challenge for us because.
Well, and you, yes, ma'am. Well, you made a really good point about grocery shopping. The standard on access is you can bring 2 bags with you. That's the ADA standard. Now, access may have services which exceed that, but under ADA, you can carry 2 bags on. And the theory from the public comment back in the 90s and 80s was the average transit person can't have 6 buses sitting at a bus stop and get them all onto the bus. It's 2 bags. Well, try to live your life getting 2 bags of groceries at a time, especially if you might not be in a position where you can heavily load them down. It stinks. And we see that in our ridership pre-pandemic. Folks who used us for grocery shopping were traveling 3-4 times a week just to get their food. Now they can get it delivered. It's so much easier to do that for the folks who can, but it's, and that's not an issue of access. It's just trying to not hit the store every day is really challenging, but we can't run a mass transit system where we have people putting 5 or 6 bags on at a time and loading them up in a chain. Then we'll be back with our on-time performance conversation. So there's a lot of, to your point again, how do you live with these services? And John, I believe you were saying something and I interrupted and I apologize.
I'm always saying something. Whether it's important or not, it's another story. Also, Michelle, remember there's a senior shared ride program funded by the lottery. So in other words, people can qualify regardless of whether they have a disability or not under that program also. I think, Catherine, I think what we're hearing is it'd be good to have, and I'd like to see this done periodically because I'm obviously an access rider also, is a presentation by access so that update the board on what's going on with our access system, which by the way is an excellent system, especially if you compare it to other systems throughout the country. But anyway, I'd like to see that also done so that people, board members have a better understanding of how our access system works and how the access system is part of us. I mean, that's part of the one thing I've always hammered home. It's part of the services that we provide for people with disabilities and for seniors. So anyways, thank you, Michelle, for bringing that up. Is there any more comments, Catherine or Michelle, on this?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions of board members? Okay. Are there any stakeholders that have any questions? Okay, seeing no additional, that brings us to the end of the program. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Meeting stands adjourned until next February. Thank you.
we'll give it a second here and we'll roll into the finance committee. Okay, I will call to order the January Finance Committee meeting, January 2023 Finance Committee. Our first item of business is a roll call of our committee members. Member Liptak, are you present?
Here.
Member Delon
Here.
and Representative Pisciotano, sorry.
No problem. Here. Good morning.
Morning. Any other board members present
Jeff
today?
Letwin. Jeff Letwin's here.
Stephanie Terman.
Michelle Smianik.
Lori
John.
Miskorsky.
Sorry, Lori. John Tagg.
Thank you. Okay, our second item of business is approval of minutes of the November 10th Finance Committee meeting. Are there any questions, comments, revisions? Okay. Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, minutes are approved. All right, next, we have two resolutions today. One to extend and amend the agreement with Bank of America. Pete.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So the first resolution is to extend and amend the agreement with for merchant card services. And what merchant card services are the contract for debit and credit card processing for the ticket vending machines and also the service center. So back in January of 2015, in accordance with the board adopted procurement policies, we did do an RFP, and the board at that time authorized a 5-year agreement for a not to exceed amount of $2.5 million with Bank of America, North America. And this agreement also included 5 additional option years at the authority's sole discretion. Last January, the board authorized PRT to exercise the first option year through January 31st of 2023 and increased the not to exceed amount to $3,162,439. To date, the services provided by Bank of America have been satisfactory. So this resolution is requesting authorization to exercise the second option year, which would extend the agreement to January 30th, 2024. And it would also increase the not to exceed amount to $3,777,439. Can I answer any questions regarding this resolution?
Any questions from committee members? Any questions from board members, other board members? Okay. Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
So
So
moved.
moved.
I
Second.
heard a second there. Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion approved. Our second resolution is authorization to apply for and enter in agreements for calendar year 2023 operating and capital grant funds.
Thank you very much. So this is authorization to apply for the calendar year 2023 operating and capital grant funds. PRT, as with all transit agencies across the country, relies on federal, state, and local subsidy funding in order to provide operations and fund its capital programs. So the Port Authority relies on 5303 Metropolitan Planning funding, Section 5307 Urban Area funding, Section 5339 Bus and Bus Facility funding. We also get both state and capital funding from PennDOT for the operating and capital budgets. and Allegheny County, and also the Regional Asset District provide annual funding to support both the capital and operating budgets. In many instances, these grants do have tight deadlines for submission. So we typically request a resolution that would authorize PRT management to submit these grant applications for the entire calendar year of 2023. In addition, as part of this, it's anticipated that our grant agreement with FTA related to the BRT project, that there would be a small start grant application of $150 million. And that's up from the $99.9 million that we had previously applied for. This that the Finance Division regular report to the have been applied for and entered into. Can I answer any questions regarding this resolution?
Any questions from the committee? Any questions from other board members? Do I have a motion to forward this resolution on to the full board's approval?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. All right. Financial statements.
Yes, and before I delve into the November and December financial statements, I wanted to turn the floor over to CEO Kellerman for a few remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Schenk. Thank you, Madam Committee Chair. Thank you, board members. A brief note, when we do the November and December financials, we refer to this as a mid-year report. It is we are reporting out how we're doing 6 months through the fiscal year. I want to stress this is not an official report. This is not an external requirement that's been imposed on PRT that we report out. It's how we term this internally. So the terms might be different, but this is our standard financial update, and I will turn it back over to our controller, Pete Schenk. Thanks, Pete.
Thank you, Catherine. So since we did not have a December meeting because of the holidays, we'll be reviewing both the November and December financial results. So the total operating income for the month of November was slightly below budget by about $88,000. Our passenger revenue was $130,479 below budget, primarily due to lower weekly stored value and contract service sales. In addition, our access shared ride revenue was also slightly under budget by $108,425. Fortunately, our interest income was exceeded budget by $217,457, which did offset a portion of that passenger revenue shortfall. Total operating income for the fiscal year through the month of November was $1.8 million below budget, with passenger revenue being the majority of that. In addition, access shared ride revenue was below budget by about $635,000. From a year-over-year perspective, just for the month of November, total operating expenses continued to be below budget. Our total expenses for the month were $3.9 million below budget due to lower salary and wages and employee benefits. Our total operating expense for the fiscal year also continues to be below budget by about $21.5 million, with every expense category other than access expense trending below budget through the month of November. Our subsidy for November was $2.56 million below budget. And that's primarily due to lower ARPA invoicing. Our subsidy for the year, $2.43 million below budget, but that should end the fiscal year within budget. From a year-over-year perspective, total operating income versus last November was $2.3 million higher than last fiscal year. Our total passenger revenues do exceed last year's total passenger revenues in November through November by $1.6 million. Also, interest income is about $731,000 higher than last fiscal year through November. Our total expenses were $18.2 million higher than last fiscal year. And I should note that's a little deceiving in terms of this November, we had 3 biweekly pays in the month of November. So it's skewing the salary and wages year over year, even though it says here that they're $8.1 million higher than last fiscal year. Part of that is due to the fact that we just had an additional pay the way it hit in the calendar year versus in fiscal 2021. Our materials and supplies are $5.6 million higher. We're incurring higher diesel fuel expense than fiscal 21. Also, our materials and supplies and reconditioned units expense is significantly higher than fiscal 21. Our other expense category is $2.4 million higher than last fiscal year due to higher software licensing and computer equipment expenses. And the access expense line item is $1.3 million higher than last fiscal year. Our total subsidy is $12.1 million higher than last fiscal year, and that's due to state operating assistance being higher than last fiscal year, which was a budgeted increase, and it's coming in on budget. Are there any questions on the November statements at all?
Any questions from the board or committee members?
Okay, then turning to the mid-year, December, total operating income for the month of December was $775,000 lower than budget and $2.5 million lower than budget at the mid-year point. That was primarily due to lower passenger revenues, which was due to lower pass sales, and which was the driver from both a monthly and a mid-year perspective. I should note that in the second half of the fiscal year, that we're anticipating receiving a significant payment from Allegheny County DHS for the low-income program, which will help mitigate some of that variance that you're seeing at the mid-year point. Total expense for the month of December and mid-year was below budget by $5.3 million for the month and $26.7 million through the midpoint of the fiscal year. That's due to lower wages and benefits, purchase services, and other expenses. Vacant positions continue to depress the wage and benefit expense levels through the first half of the year. In addition, our work done by outside contractors, our software licensing, and computer equipment are also significantly below budget. From a subsidy perspective, our subsidy is $3 million below budget at mid-year. And that's low due to lower federal stimulus invoicing, but that will normalize by the end of the fiscal year. From a year-over-year perspective at the midpoint.
And I have a question before he moves on. May I ask again?
Sure, go ahead.
Can you repeat what you said again about the Department of Human Services low-income pilot program income? What did you say with regard to that?
Yeah, so we just did an invoice, I believe at the end of December, a significant invoice towards the low-income fare program. So that will go quite a ways towards eliminating some of that variance that you see in the passenger revenue line item.
So you're referring to that there were passes that were purchased for the program, but they hadn't been paid yet. That's why there's a difference.
Yeah. We just did the invoicing in December, and we'll be getting it, within the next 30 to 60 days. So it's not reflected in the current, not reflected in the current year to date through December. But you'll see it in the next, 30 to 60 days.
I was just confused because it sounded like you said that you were getting a subsidy for that program, where it's basically like universities where it bypasses and then pays. So now I understand. I got it. So thank you. And if I will actually inquire on the expediency of the invoice, because we should be paying you guys as quickly as we can. Thank
you. All right. So from a mid-year perspective, our total operating income versus last December is $2.5 million higher than last fiscal year. And that is due to, or principally due to higher passenger revenues, which are $1.46 million higher than through December of 2021. Our expenses are $12.5 million higher than last fiscal year, with employee benefits being $1.9 million higher, materials and supplies $6.4 million higher, other expenses $3.3 million higher, and tax expense $1.6 million higher than last fiscal year. Our subsidies are $9.4 million higher last fiscal year, and that is due once again to the higher state operating assistance than in fiscal 2021. From a operating reserve perspective, at the midpoint of the fiscal year, we began December with $135.2 million in operating reserves. And during the month, we received $49.5 million in cash inflows, $21.8 million of that being from PennDOT for state operating assistance, and $4.5 million for passenger revenues. During the month, we had cash outflows of $43.2 million for salary and wages, benefits, materials and supplies, purchase services, and miscellaneous expense. And so we ended the month of December with $141.5 million in operating reserves. Can I answer any questions on the December?
Any questions from committee or board members?
And then just to give the board an update of where we are on our federal stimulus usage. In 2022, we invoiced about $58.6 million in federal stimulus dollars for fiscal 23. Now this is just as of last week, actually. We've invoiced $28.7 million in ARPA, and that gives us a remaining balance in the three programs of slightly under $310 million. Can I answer any questions on the financials?
And just refresh my memory, what's the time frame for spending down the rest of it? Is there a deadline?
The ARPA, I believe, is 2026. So that's why we're doing, we reverted from CARES financing, which we had done in the previous fiscal years, to ARPA. And the CARES and CARISA do not have a spending deadline. So we just want to make sure we focus on the spend down on the ARPA.
All right, any other questions from the committee or board?
And I have a question going back a few slides, Peter, to the regional asset district funding. In the past, and maybe it was in your, maybe I just missed it, was $3 million. Is it the same, or is it going down, or? Because I wasn't sure how that was, how the pandemic.
It's currently, we were just approved for $3 million for the calendar year.
Thank you. Thanks, Ann.
Else? Hearing none, we can adjourn. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And we'll see you in February.
Thanks very much.
Good morning, everyone. This is Michelle Smianik. It is now time for Performance Oversight Committee. So good morning, everyone. Our first item of business this morning will be roll call of our committee members. And so Lori Magorski, Representative, are you still with us? I see you. Good
Yes.
morning.
Good morning. I am here.
And I'm here too. So that's the end of our roll call. So that's it. Our next item, Lori, is going to be approval of our meeting minutes for the November 10th, 22 Performance Oversight. Do we have any corrections, changes, additions to those meeting minutes?
I do not.
Okay, hearing none. Could I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
And I will second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Now it's time for item 3, moving forward to our proposed resolutions this morning. And this is awarding a bid. So good morning, Mr. Trona. You are ready to rock and roll. So good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, committee members, board members. I have 4 items for your review and presentation to the full board for approval. All of our bids were publicly advertised and e-business documents were distributed. The first is coach replacement parts, EGR coolers for Cummins diesel engines. 2 firms accepted our invitation. 2 bids were received for the purchase of these parts. The low bidder, Planet Cellular, did not respond to PRT's request for additional information. And the products proposed therefore are determined to be non-responsive and ineligible for award. It's our recommendation that the contract be awarded to the low responsive bidder, which was Cummins Inc. in an estimated amount of $162,467. This price represents a 9% increase over the previous contract 1 year ago. Planet Cellular's bid was $149,000. The difference from contract to the recommended award is approximately $13,000. Number 2, remanufactured exchange fuel injectors. 3 firms accepted our invitation. 3 bids were received for the purchase of these fuel injectors for our Cummins diesel engines. The low bidder, again, Planet Cellular, did not meet the specification and therefore was ineligible for award. It is our recommendation that the contract be awarded to the low responsive bidder, which submitted a responsive bid, which was Cummins Inc. This in an estimated price of $729,748.80. This price represents a 12% increase from the previous contracted price for these items 2 years ago. Again, they did not meet the specification. The low bid, Planet Cellular, was $452,401.80. The difference of the award is $277,347. They did not submit quality certifications. They did not submit environmental certifications. They did not submit the part that we were actually looking for. This is an integral part of our engines. Cummins diesel engines are broken up into distribution, and therefore anybody that's going to bid this contract would have to go to the local Cummins distributor, and thus probably will not be competitive on these types of bids.
Hey, Tony, what's the deal with Planet Cellular? I mean, in 2 instances, how do they get on our bidding list? Have we ever had any experience with them?
Well, we've never had experience with them, Jeff, and anybody could go into our bidders list and say, submit a bid. Obviously, they have to meet our specification. So they did submit, and they were timely bid. However, we could not accept the product that they were trying to sell us.
Okay.
Number 3, overhead line heating system. 2 firms accepted our invitation. 1 bid was received for this line heating system components utilized in our authority's LRV system. Recommendation the contract be awarded to the low responsive bidder, which was Omni Control Technology, estimated amount of $159,356. This price represents a 25% increase over the previous price of these components 2 years ago. As according to our policy, we get a single bid, we do a single bid survey. And it was conducted around the potential bidders that we had on our list. And their response was they would have to purchase the parts from Omni since it's Omni's system, and thus they would not be competitive. Number 4, vending machine service. This is a revenue contract. One bid was received for vending machine services that include 3 separate proposals for a 4-year period. This contract will provide food, beverage, vending machine services to authorities' employees working at various facilities. The authority receives a portion of the proceeds of all vending machine sales, and therefore the solicitation was structured so that the award would be given to the highest bidder. Our recommendation that the contract go to the highest bidder, which was AVI Food Systems, estimated amount of $296,424 over a 4-year period. The fixed commission rate of 35.8% represents the same fixed commission rate previous contracts held by AVI Systems over the past 4 years. That concludes my report. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Trona. I have none. Do other committee members, Lori, any questions?
No, I don't, but thank you.
Any other board members' questions for Mr. Trona? Hearing none, thank you so much. Thank you for your clarity and information on these as we talk about why people may not qualify for bids. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Moving on to item B, authorization to enter into easement agreements with the Borough of Edgewood for bus stop improvements. Mr. Mike Setra, good morning.
Good morning, Madam Committee Chairwoman and committee members and other board members. This resolution would authorize PRT to enter into easement agreements with the Borough of Edgewood. As part of our public transportation system, PRT operates bus service at various bus stops in Edgewood adjacent to PRT's Martin Luther King Jr. East Busway. PRT is working on plans to make certain improvements at 2 pairs of borough bus stops. One pair is located near the intersection of Edgewood Avenue and Gordon Street, and the other pair is located near the intersection of Edgewood Avenue and Elm Street. Next slide, please, Cheryl. So with a little help from the Transit Amenities Group, a bit of an aerial view here of the 2 locations. As you'll see on this aerial view, the improvements would include installation of curb bump outs, replacing sidewalks, and installing new bus stop signage for PRT patrons utilizing the stops. They're currently very narrow sidewalk areas, so this will make these stops safer, particularly for those with utilizing mobility devices and aids. And I should note the stops are currently served by 2 bus routes to 61A North Braddock and the P7 McKeesport Flyer. In order to complete and maintain PRT's proposed bus stop improvements, PRT does require easements from the Edgewood Borough, including an approximately 255 square foot inbound easement and approximately 400 square foot outbound easement at the Edgewood Avenue and Gordon Street stops, and an approximately 250 square foot inbound and an approximately 482 square foot outbound easement at the Edgewood Avenue and Elm Street stops. So you can see both stops highlighted there on the aerial map on your screens. We have negotiated proposed easements agreements with the borough, subject to final approval by the board. So subject to any committee member or other member questions, I'd respectfully request that the committee recommend this resolution to the full board for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Setra. Anyone have any questions?
No, thank you.
Board, any questions for Mike Setra on this? Hearing none, we'll move forward to item C, which is authorization for settlement and public liability claim.
Thank you. This second resolution that I have for the committee's consideration this morning would authorize PRT to settle a personal injury lawsuit. An accident involving a PRT way department pickup truck and a private automobile occurred at approximately 3 p.m. on May 27, 2020 at the intersection of McMonagle and North Meadowcraft Avenues in the borough of Dormont. The plaintiff, Ms. Sopronio, was proceeding through the intersection when her vehicle was struck by the PRT pickup truck. Ms. Sopronio suffered alleged physical injuries as a result of the accident and subsequently submitted a personal injury claim and filed a personal injury lawsuit against PRT seeking monetary recovery. Following good faith negotiations between our legal counsel and Ms. Sopronio's legal counsel, the parties have agreed, subject to approval by PRT's board, to fully and finally settle the matter with no admission of guilt or liability by PRT for the total proposed settlement amount of $145,000. Again, subject to any committee or other member questions, I'd respectfully request that the committee recommend this resolution to the full board for approval, which would authorize the settlement for the proposed settlement amount of $145,000 in a release form approved by PRT's legal counsel.
Thank you, Mr. Sutter. Lori, do you have any questions for Mr. Sutter?
No, thank you.
Other board members, questions? Hearing none, could I have a motion, Lori, to move this forward to the full board?
So moved.
I'll second that. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries to full board. Thank you, Mr. Sutter.
Thank you.
Madam Committee Chair, I'm sorry, this is Sandy Garfinkel.
Yes.
I may be wrong about this, but on the prior resolution concerning the easement agreements with Edgewood Borough, I don't know if we called for a vote to move that one forward to the board. Did I miss that? I think we had, you asked for questions and then we moved to the next resolution without a vote.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then let's back up. Lori, we're going to move back up for item B for the record. The authorization to enter into easement agreements with the Borough of Edgewood for the bus stop improvements. Could I have a motion to move this forward to the next board?
So moved.
I'm going to second that motion. All in favor in moving that forward, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries to move forward to the full board. Thank you, Mr. Garfinkel, for bringing that to my attention.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Okay, great. Thank you. Moving forward now to item D, which would be authorization to award general and electrical construction contracts for the East Liberty and Wilkinsburg electrical upgrades project. Mr. Greg O'Hare, good morning.
Good morning. This resolution seeks authorization to award construction contract SYS 2207 G and E for East Liberty and Wilkinsburg electrical upgrades. The overall scope of the project is for the installation and electrical infrastructure equipment and general construction to provide battery electric bus charging capability. At the East Liberty Garage, the scope of work consists of medium voltage substation with distribution switchgear and backup electrical systems, 15 cabled fast chargers, 1 overhead pantograph fast charger, a 2-tiered exterior steel structure, that's for the back end equipment for the electrical equipment, concrete support pads and foundations, asphalt and concrete paving. At the Wilkinsburg Park and Ride, the scope of work consists of low voltage switchboard and backup electrical systems, 3 en route overhead pantograph fast chargers, concrete support pads and foundations, and asphalt and concrete paving. The overall project duration is 675 calendar days from notice to proceed, which is approximately 22 months. One bid was received for general construction. In accordance with procurement policy, a single bid survey was performed of all plan holders. It was determined the bid was fair and reasonable and allowed for fair competition. 4 bids were received for electrical construction. The low responsive bidder for general construction is Mercedes Construction Company with a bid of $3,388,000. The low responsive bid for electrical construction was Wellington Power Corporation with a bid of $14,423,597. Just wanted to point out for illustration purposes for the board, on the left-hand side is an overhead view of the 2 locations, the East Liberty Garage out along the East Busway. The East Busway is the purple line in the overhead aerial map. And then at the Wilkinsburg Park and Ride, highlighted in red on the right-hand portion of the overhead map, just to illustrate the locations of where this charging equipment will be installed. On the right-hand side is 3 illustrative pictures of some of the electrical equipment to be installed just for the board's understanding of the equipment that will be put out at these locations. The upper left-hand picture is a picture of a cabled fast charger. Consists of two components. The pantograph fast charger on the right-hand side, and then also the medium voltage substation in the bottom left-hand picture. Pending any questions, I respectfully request the committee to move the resolution to the full board for consideration.
Thank you, Mr. O'Hare. Lori, do you have any questions for Mr. O'Hare?
Yes, and you may not be able to answer, but this pantograph fast charger, how does that work? What is different about that compared to the cabled fast charger?
Sure, absolutely. That's a great question. So I'll start with the cabled fast charger. The cabled fast chargers, they're installed inside the garage. And as you can see, there's a picture of a small box that's kind of like the gas station pump. It has a wire cable sticking out to the bottom of that. That is what actually plugs into the bus to charge the bus. So that occurs inside the garage facility. The pantograph fast chargers, those are located outside of facilities, or in the case of Wilkinsburg, there'll be several of those out there. The bus pulls beneath the pantograph fast charger. And it might be a little difficult to see in the illustration there. There's a red pantograph is what they call it, and it lowers down and touches the top of the bus, and it charges the bus that way.
Okay, thank you.
It's
Sure thing, my pleasure.
John, I have a question. Michelle, how long does it take to charge a bus? Maybe you put that
Yes.
in.
Sure. So that varies depending on how much charge was used on the bus. So that could be from a couple hours to several hours per bus.
So it's not.
How long does it take for a full charge?
Yeah. So for a full charge, my understanding is about 3 to 4 hours for a full charge. And that's on the cable fast charger. The pantograph fast charger, as a bus is laying over at a particular location, such as at East Liberty Garage, where the one pantograph will be, or out at the Wilkinsburg Park and Ride. The intent is not necessarily to get a full charge at the pantograph fast chargers, but to charge the batteries as they are doing their route, or as they're laying over, to go ahead and increase the battery slightly so that they can continue on with their route.
I did have a follow-up question on that. How far can a bus go when fully charged? We know that.
I don't know offhand, but I can get that answer for you, though.
Okay, thank you.
So, Madam Chair, if I may, so are you saying, I just want to try to bring this down to non-technical terms. When you're charging your phone, you plug it in, it charges faster, doesn't take as long, but it's a quick charge. Sometimes there's magnetic chargers that we use. They take a little longer, but they also provide that quick recharge you need. And that's kind of what you're going to deploy outside of the garages to do a faster, just to kind of get a little bit of a infusion of energy into the battery. And then when they come back into the garage for service, they'll get the inline hardline charger, which will go faster, faster, but we don't have the capability to do it on the outside. It's probably not as efficient. Does that sound about right?
Yes, absolutely correct. Yes, thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Thanks.
Yep, perfect.
Thank you,
And Mr. Tech, to answer your question, it's approximately 125 miles on a full charge.
Thank you.
John, did you want to muddy the waters a little more by asking if that's a bus route that's uphill more than another?
No, I'm not. I don't want to get too
clarify.
I don't want to get too technical on this anyways. I was just curious because, again, it's important, how long a bus can be out before it needs to go back to be charged. That's all. So no more technical questions.
Great questions. Anyone else on the board have questions for Mr. O'Hare on these issues? Okay, hearing none. Lori, could I have a motion to move this forward to the full board?
So moved.
I'm going to second that. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries to the full board. Continuing along with item E, authorization to enter into agreements with a pool of firms for construction management and program management services. So continuing with Mr. O'Hare. Thank you.
Thank you. So this resolution seeks authorization to enter into an agreements with a pool of firms to provide construction management and program management services. The top three categories consist of the construction management categories. Category A is for bridges and heavy highway. Category B is garage. Category C is rail and systems. The scope of services for these three categories consist of constructability review, bid and award period services, construction management and inspection services, field surveying, and claim support services. Category D consists of program management services. The scope of services for program management is to provide oversight and project management of design consultants, construction managers, and contractors on designated PRT projects. Seven proposals for RFP 2205 were received on October 31st, 2022. A pool of 7 firms in 4 service categories are presented here for award. The table below illustrates the various service categories and the firms being proposed. Category A, Bridges and Heavy Highway, highest rated firm CDR McGuire Incorporated, followed by Hill International Incorporated, SAI Consulting Engineers Incorporated, and TRC Engineers Incorporated. For Category B, Garages and Facilities, is Hill International Incorporated, SAI Consulting Engineers Incorporated, WSP USA, and Parsons Transportation Group Incorporated. For Category C, Rail and Systems, is SAI Consulting Engineers Incorporated, Hill International Incorporated, Parsons Transportation Group Incorporated, and WSP USA Incorporated. For Category D, for Program Management, is Urban Engineers Incorporated, CDR McGuire Incorporated, Parsons Transportation Group Incorporated. The term is for 3 years with 2 option years. The proposed agreement not to exceed amount of $50 million on a task order basis as needed. With that, pending any questions, respectfully request the committee to move the resolution to the board for consideration.
Lori, any questions?
No, thank you.
Other board members, questions for Mr. O'Hare? Hearing none, could I have a motion to move this forward to the full board?
So moved.
Second, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries to the full board. Thank you, Mr. O'Hare.
Thank you.
With that, that concludes our business for this morning with the Performance Oversight Committee. Could I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second. Thank you, everyone. Moving forward to
Thank you.
Technology. Thank you.
Hello, thank you, Michelle. I appreciate, I have the agenda up and I know Lori's on the line and some others, so we'll get started with the Technology Committee if that's good with everyone else. So we'll begin the meeting with call to order, and I'd like to call the roll. Myself, Chair Liptak is here. Ms. Gorski?
I'm here, yes.
Thank you. And anyone else would like to identify themselves, board members, please do so now.
Jeff Letwin's here.
Michelle Smianik?
John Tagg.
Jim Brewster.
Thank you. Moving forward, we're going to start with our agenda. We have the first item of business, which is the approval of the minutes from November 10th, 2022 Technology Committee meeting. May I have a motion to approve, Lori?
So moved.
And I will second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is, we're going to move on to the proposed resolutions. We have awarding of the bids. I believe Tony's going to take care of that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Board members, committee members, I have 2 items for your review and presentation to the full board for approval. The first is Palo Alto firewall replacement. This is a CoStar's state schedule. Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Department of General Services awarded a contract covering IT hardware and software to AEC Group, and the authority wishes to purchase under the same terms and conditions. Contract is effective through December 21, 23, and PRT wishes to purchase installation and configuration assistance of AE Group, LLC, covering a period of 4 months. Recommendation that the contract be awarded through the same terms and conditions as CoStar's IT hardware service, IT hardware and contract, IT software to AEC Group, estimated amount of $366,744.10. Staff has determined the pricing on the state schedule to be fair and reasonable and within funds budgeted. Number 2 is Nutanix HCI cluster. This is also on a state schedule. The Department of General IT hardware and software to Ideal Integrations, and PRT wishes to make the purchases under the same terms and conditions. The contract is effective through October 12th, 24, and PRT wishes to purchase installation and configuration assistance from Ideal Integrations, covering a period of 4 months. The recommendation that the contract be awarded under the same terms and conditions as DGS CoStar's IT hardware to Ideal Integrations LLC for Nutanix HCI cluster hardware support services in the amount of $639,155.88. This concludes my report.
Thank you, Tony. Are there any questions from committee members or board members?
Yes, I'm just curious, what is an HCI cluster hardware? I have to have a question for you, or just no fun.
That's a phenomenal question, Lori. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to turn that over to our IT department because they will give you a better explanation than I can.
The most simple explanation is all that's needed.
It's just a really fancy name for a very big storage server to store data files, to run our network services. Mostly it's data storage for our network services and stuff. That's a fancy term for it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And on behalf of everyone, I thank you for explanation, because I didn't know what that was either, but I assumed it was something related to IT storage, but thank you for that. So hearing no other questions, I'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
And I will second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. I believe there's no other business to come before us, correct, Jeff?
That's correct.
Okay. So thank you. If there's no other questions from Lori or board members, on behalf of the Technology Committee and all the committees, members and chairs of the Pittsburgh Regional Transit, Scott and myself, I'd like to thank everyone for their participation today. And with that, we will adjourn the committee meetings for today. Thank you, and everyone have a good day.
Thank you.
Before-
Actually, I think we have a
we
financial.
have one more committee. Yeah, sorry
What do we
to
do?
interrupt.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the Financial Audit Committee. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. We don't, so we're not adjourning. I apologize. I'm usually the last one. You're right. I forgot. Senator Brewster, my apologies. So we're still on. Okay, I will hand it over. My committee is adjourned, and I will hand it over to Senator Brewster. My apologies.
Thank you, Jen. Okay, good morning, all. This will be the final committee meeting. I'm going to call the January 19th, 2023 Financial Audit Committee to order. We'll start with a roll call. Myself, Chairman Jim Brewster.
John Tagg.
John Tagg. And any other board members, if you would identify yourself for the record.
Jeff Letwin.
Michelle Smianik.
Lori Misgorski.
And Jen's here, who tried to close all the committee meetings today. Sorry about that.
Okay, Jen. Apology accepted, Jen. No problem. Okay, we need approval of the minutes for the January 20th, 2022 Financial Audit Committee meeting. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, I will second that. Any question on the motion? Roll call. John?
Aye.
And of course, I as well. That moves us forward with the independent auditors report from Mayor Duzel representatives, if they are available on the screen or on the phone.
Yes, thanks very much, Senator, and fellow board members. Before Jeff Kent and Dustin Starr present from Mayor Duzel, I just did want to take a moment and thank both the Mayor Dussel team, Dave Dussel, Jeff Kent, Dustin Starr, Diane Hanshoe. This is really a culmination of about a 5-month process that we go through on an annual basis. And I also wanted just to take a moment to thank the finance team made up of Ed Typansky, Sarah Shardling, Tia Gunn, Sean Tregesser, and Kelly Kendall, who work on a day-to-day basis with the folks at Mayor Dussel in preparing the single audit. So with that, I will turn it over to Jeff Kent and Dustin Starr for at Mayor Dussel to review the findings of the single audit.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Happy to be with you all to discuss the 2022 audit and results. We're essentially completed with the audit and are in a good position to talk through high-level results with you today, and then proceed with finalizing the reports pending approval next week. We've prepared a brief handout that will go through that discusses required communications, audit results, and some summary financial information. Okay. We go to the next page. Okay, so this page shows reports that we issue as part of the process. Obviously, the financial statements themselves, which includes the single audit. The single audit is the additional reporting that we do related to the federal funding that you receive. We issue a letter called communication to those charged with governance that goes through communications we're required to make under our professional standards. We'll hit the highlights of those in this letter. And then your reports include supplementals, schedules required by PennDOT. And we also, as part of the process, do specific procedures that are required by the NTD. We separately audit the pension plans. Those are finalized, but we also, a rolled up version of those financial statements are included in the authority's financial statements as well. The next several slides discuss the highlights of the required communication letter. First part of that letter talks about responsibilities. So we're basically issuing, the scope of our audit includes a financial statement audit, which we're issuing an opinion on the financial statements, the material accuracy of the financial statements. And again, because of the level of federal funding you receive, we do additional reporting on internal control and on compliance with the major federal programs. So our responsibility is obviously to issue those reports in accordance with our professional standards. The communication letter talks about the fact that the internal control systems, the internal control over compliance, the accuracy of the financial statements are the responsibility of the authority. And then I think we can go to the next page as well. In terms of accounting policies, your footnotes describe your accounting policies. For the most part, they're consistent with what you've seen in the past. There was one new standard adoption this year, GASB 87, related to a revision to accounting for leases. The result of that, the implementation of that standard, mainly resulted in your right to use building lease being recorded as an asset and a liability. Previously, that activity just ran through the income statement as you made the payment. So not a huge impact other than kind of a gross up of the asset and the liability, which are based on present value of future payments. The next page here, the communication letter points out some of the significant estimates that are included in your financial statements. Certainly the liabilities related to the net pension liability and the OPEB liability. Those are certainly large estimates, actuarially determined amounts. And then your claims and settlements liability also subject to significant estimate. In terms of the results, happy to report We received good cooperation from everybody involved in the audit. We received everything we asked for as part of the process. And in terms of the books and records, everything was in good shape, other than kind of the normal closing process that happens as part of the audit. Nothing significant identified in terms of audit adjustments. And then the next page here, I think, is where Dustin is going to take over to talk through the reports we issue, as well as the financial statement highlights.
Okay, moving on to the summary of auditor reports issued. We issue 3 reports found within the single audit package. The first being the independent auditor's report on the financial statements themselves. We are prepared to issue an unmodified or a clean audit opinion on both PRT and then each of the separately issued pension financial statements. The second report is required for any deficiencies in internal controls of the entity as a whole. We are glad to report back that we did not identify any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses during the course of our audit procedures. And then lastly, the third report found within the single audit package narrows in on compliance over federally funded programs. We did audit one major program for 2022, and that's the Federal Transit Cluster. Total federal awards expended was approximately 114 million, and that federal transit cluster makes up for about 113 million. So the large portion of the federal funding that's received is annually audited, and we are providing a unmodified compliance opinion, and we did not identify any non-compliance there. So moving on to summary financial statements, comparison of 2022 to 2021. Fairly consistent in overall asset and liability activity. Going to point out some of the larger items. The liability section is probably the biggest change, and it's going to be kind of the theme for the next 2 slides, is that the pension plan specifically is reported on a December year end, and the financial statements are reported for the liability related to the net liability related to any pension obligations was down compared to the prior year. As you kind of roll that forward into current times, most likely that liability will go back up because the pension investments aren't performing to what they did as of December 31, 2021. So that's the largest decrease related to the non-current liabilities. Overall ending net position, or the equity of PRT as of year end, is approximately $229 million. Then moving on to summary financial statements related to revenue, expenses, and changes. Overall operating loss as of year end, $445 million, which is then funded by non-operating and capital grants. So this is all operating and capital subsidies that are received during the year. Again, some of the biggest changes related to the pension and OPEB. We're referring to these as non-cash items because they're not related to the funding of the plans. However, it's related again to that change from one year to the next of the underlying assets. The pension plan has assets. The OPEB plan is funded on a pay-as-you-go basis. So as that liability increases from one year to the next, you'll see that change here. In the pension plan, much larger change, decrease there because the overall operating results of the underlying pension investments. Another big change, operating revenues, of course, increased from the prior year related to additional ridership, and the overall expenditures remain relatively consistent from one year to the next. So the overall change in net position was a positive approximately $40 million for 2022, which was also an increase from the prior year of approximately $10 million in 2021. Next slide. So as I mentioned, a large operating loss of approximately 389 in the prior slide. Let's say 445 million in the prior slide. The operating losses then to reconcile back to that, you're starting with the 445. then subtracting out any non-cash items which related to the OPEB and pension, as I mentioned, as well as depreciation expense. These are not funded by the operating subsidies. You're then left with 392 million to be funded by the subsidies, and then breaking out how that's funded to essentially a break even on the operating side. Capital used for operating, 49 million, very consistent with the prior year. Capital used for operating, CARES funding decreased from the prior year from 74 to 59. PennDOT funding, state subsidy, 247, which is an increase from 240 in the prior year. Local, 37 versus 24, and then local CARES was entirely spent in 2021. Therefore, just a normal local increase from the prior year for relatively the same amount as the prior year. You're then left with 392 of operating grants to fund that operating loss for a break-even operating point. Anything that's received past the break-even of the operating is then reported as deferred revenue, and that's exactly what this slide is depicting. The state operating assistance has been growing since 2020 or 2012. Each year that increase by the excess that is received to meet that break-even point mentioned in the prior slide. The current year it increased to $160 million. That is, as funding then starts to back off and decrease from one year to the next, that unearned revenue will then become depleted over a period of time. For 2022, the increase in the operating was approximately $4 million to get to that 160 million. There are a couple other items that are found within the unearned revenue found on the financial statements. In addition to the PennDOT operating, that includes PTAF funding for bond debt service, county capital funding of 26 million, and then other of 2 million for a total found on the financial statements of 196 million for unearned revenue. Okay, then moving on, the net pension liability. As I mentioned, the pension does have underlying investment trusts. So the overall net liability is found here, found up between the three plans, approximately 187 for ATU, 5 million for IBEW, and 22 million for non-REP. Changes to the pension plans. So the discount rate currently used is approximately 7.25%. So that's the expected rate of return on the investments. If the actual return would decrease by 1%, the liability would go up. And if the actual return on investments would increase by 1%, the liability would decrease here. So this is a good slide that shows just how much 1% can change from one year to the next. What's being used for estimating purposes is 7.25. The actual results change from one year to the next, and then you'll have that change in the net pension liability reported on the financial statements. From a funding standpoint, 2021 versus 2020, pension plans are on a December year end, as I mentioned. Overall increase in the percentage as the investment portfolio performed well in 2021. 84% funded for ATU, 83% funded for IBW, and 83% funded for non-rep, all up from approximately 75 to 76% from the prior year. Then moving on to the OPEB liability. The OPEB liability is other than pension employee benefits, predominantly relating to health-related insurances. ATU 544, IBU 14, and non-rep $35 million. One of the reasons why these liabilities are significantly higher is because there's no underlying trust set aside to pay these liabilities. And the amount that you're seeing here would be the cumulative effect of all entitled employees to receive their benefits. So the funding, how the plan is funded is currently on a pay-as-you-go basis. So as these liabilities come due, they're being paid. This liability would be if all liabilities would come due. This is considered a long-term liability. It is not how you essentially look at that from a funding standpoint. Next, again, the current rate. So instead of looking at it from a investment portfolio, since there are no investments, this would be an increase or decrease in the overall cost of the underlying medical rates. So if costs went up a percent as well. Next slide, please. Upcoming changes. As mentioned, GASB 87 for leases was what was adopted during 2022. There is a similar standard that will be applicable for 2024, and that's the last on the list, the information technology arrangements. So similar to how any leasing arrangements for capital related items, these will be applied to IT related, so long-term software type arrangements will be considered to be applicable to this standard where there's a right to use asset found within the financial statements and an offsetting liability that is amortized related to the overall payments that are expected to be made for the life of that agreement. All other items on the up and coming changes are relatively immaterial, no significant changes to the financial statements expected other than the IT technology arrangements. That is our contact information. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Peter, can we take questions now from the committee and the board? Or do you have
Yes.
comments?
No, I'm done. If there are any questions, we have Dustin and Jeff here. If not, I can read the resolution.
It's John. I have no questions.
No question. How about board members? Any questions? Okay, hearing none, seeing none. Peter, do you want to read the resolution?
Certainly, Senator. So this is a authorization to accept the 2022 Independent Auditors Report. Representatives from Mayor Duzel presented the results of the 2022 audit report to the Financial Audit Committee and concluded that PRT's fiscal 2022 financial statements fairly present PRT's financial position as of June 30th, 2021 and June 30th, 2022, respectively. And PRT has adequate controls in place to ensure accurate financial reporting and compliance with relevant laws, regulations, contracts, and grant agreements. This resolution authorized PRT to accept the fiscal 2022 audit report and further authorizes the chair of PRT's board and chair of the Financial Audit Committee to formally sign and accept the report on behalf of PRT.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Before I ask for the motion, I would be remiss if I didn't thank Peter and staff at the PRT and Mayor Duzel for their always accurate and prompt and efficient audit. Thank you, the representatives from our audit committee. And I just want to say this for the record. This is our report card to the public. This shows our effectiveness, our oversight from our board chairman, Letwin, our CEO, Catherine, Peter and staff, and all the other committees that we've heard this morning. So thank you all for what you've done through this year and the prior year. And at this time, I'll accept a motion to approve the resolution to move on to the full board.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I will second that. Any question or comment on the motion? Hearing none, seeing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. At this point in time, the resolution will be passed on to the full board for approval. And I believe at that time, Peter, unless I'm mistaken, once it's approved by the board, it will be available on the website for public viewing.
It certainly will, and thank you very much for the kind words.
Okay, Peter, thank you. And if there's no further comments, no new business, old business, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I will second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does Jennifer have another report?